Scottish independence is about one thing above all else. The people who live in Scotland should be the people who decide Scotland's future. That's it. It's not about whether you feel Scottish, British, English, European. We all have our own stories, our own identities, and we can all call Scotland our home. It's not about where you come from or about the past. It's about the future and where we're going together. With independence, the people of Scotland would always get the governments we vote for. It's not about the SNP. You can vote for any party you want, but Scotland's future will be in Scotland's hands. Independence means Scotland will have its own voice on the world stage and be an equal partner with the rest of the UK. Scotland is a nation in the northwest of Europe with two governments. The Scottish Government in Edinburgh and the UK Government in London. At Westminster, Scotland very rarely gets the government it votes for. Scotland hasn't voted for the Tories since the 50s, yet we've had Tory government after Tory government since then as part of the UK. This means the UK government can inflict damaging policies against Scotland's wishes, such as Brexit, dragging us out of trade deals, bringing rising food prices, rising energy bills, and hurting Scottish businesses. In fact, the UK government's own stats body, the OBR, says,
in the long term it is the case that Brexit has a bigger impact than the pandemic over the long term.
It means 800 lords and baronesses who make up more than half the UK Parliament are unelected and unaccountable, and they're there for life.
The UK is not remotely a corrupt country, nor do I believe that our institutions are corrupt.
It means that Tory corruption carries on unchecked, and there's very little we can do about it within the Union. Under devolution, there are powers that are devolved to the Scottish Parliament and there are powers reserved at Westminster. However, the Tories are using Brexit as an excuse to launch a power grab on the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people, and to overrule laws passed in Scotland. In fact, they've taken the Scottish Parliament to court to stop us from passing a bill that strengthens children's rights. His former chief advisor says Boris Johnson wants to abolish the Scottish Parliament. The Scottish Government, despite limited powers, has delivered free tuition, free prescriptions, free personal care and free dental care for young people. And as we build back from the pandemic, the people who live in Scotland should decide what kind of country we build, not have it decided for us by Westminster and Boris Johnson. After all, independence is normal. Of all the countries which have become independent from the UK, not one of them has tried to come back. Independent countries of a similar size to Scotland, like our neighbours Denmark, Norway and Ireland, are thriving. They're all happier, wealthier and fairer than the UK. Scotland is a nation in waiting. From our highly educated population to our abundance of natural resources, the power to build that better, fairer, greener and more equal independent Scotland is in all of our hands. And all you have to do is mark an X next to yes on a ballot paper.
Pledge your support for Scottish independence at yes.scot.
Good morning, delegates, and a very warm welcome to the final day of the 87th Annual National SNP Conference. I'm Kirsten Oswald and I am the business convener, and I'm joined on the virtual stage by National Secretary Stuart Stevenson, and we'll guide you through today's session. We're also glad to be joined by Lou and
Good morning, conference. I'm afraid we've got a wee technical glitch, so I'm starting to introduce the debate on Resolution 24, preservation of inshore fisheries and habitat. I beg your pardon. Let me go back to the top. Stuart Stevenson fails. We start today with Resolution 23, Climate and Ecological Emergency. The proposer will be Susan Dyer, who is a first-time speaker, and the seconder will be Chris Hanlon from West Fife and Coastal Villages. So, welcome to Susan Dyer.
The climate and ecological emergency is so acute it is an existential threat. Nothing is more important. There is no health, no education, no judiciary, there is no economy on a dead planet. So tackling this is our top priority. Rising sea levels and temperatures result in more powerful storms and flooding, impacting the global south, who have done least to cause this. Land temperatures are soaring. We've had forest fires in virtually every continent, wiping out forests and releasing enormous quantities of CO2 into the already overloaded atmosphere. Millions of tonnes of methane, 25 times more potent than CO2, could be released from the melting permafrost. We could not recover from that. Vast swathes of the planet are reaching 50 degrees. That's fatal. The results are famine and mass migration. Millions of people are going to die, and there could be global conflict. Excessive amounts of CO2 acidifies our oceans, killing our marine life. You can't harvest food from lifeless waters. Our insect population has depleted by 60%. If we have no pollinators, there is no food for man or beast, and we all starve. We are seeing species extinction and biodiversity loss at the most alarming rate. So don't accept the spin cycle greenwash. The science clearly states things are a lot worse than we thought, and we have less time than we thought. Despite this, there have been 26 failed COPs. Instead of the urgent transformational action we need to ensure our survival, we are set on a course to emit yet more CO2, more oil, more coal, obliteration of the Amazon. This is sheer insanity. Antonio Guterres has said, code red, no excuses, no delays. If we dig up more fossil fuels, we dig our own graves. The next 5 years are critical. In that time, there will be an independence referendum. This gives us a glimmer of hope. Scotland could lead the way. World leaders who literally slept through COP are mired in torpor. I want to shake them and say, wake up, snap out of it. Their actions are woefully inadequate. I know government wants to tell us that we need to change our lifestyles, but we all know we do. Everybody has to step up to the plate. No one is coming to rescue us, so we have to save ourselves. We have to take the lead. This is a clarion call to action. Rise up, people. Get out on the streets and protest. Flood Boris Johnson's mailbox with demands. We know where he lives. That's his email. Boycott countries who take more fossil fuels out of the ground or cut down rainforest. Don't visit their countries, don't buy their goods. Only use your car for essentials. Walk, cycle, take the bus, stop flying, eat less meat. We all know what we need to do, but governments can act swiftly and drastically when they choose. They did it for COVID, they did it for the financial crash. In World War II, overnight car production was stopped. The workforce was retrained in 3 months and they made bombers and fighters for the war effort. We could mobilise at that scale to put in renewables. And with $11 million a minute in global oil subsidies, there's plenty of money. demand transformational change at a scale and pace never seen before, insist on the swiftest action to transition to renewables, ban the production of fossil fuel cars within the next 5 years, incentivise EVs, ration petrol if need be. We have to throw everything we have at this. We have to do whatever it takes if we want to survive. We must mobilise to save the only known planet in the universe that supports life. Please support this very important resolution.
Blah, 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 blah. I've had about enough of blah, blah, blah. I've had enough of excuses and whataboutery. If this were a disaster movie, we would be just about to enter the second act, about where the audience knows that the experts are right and the politicians need to take action right now, but they're all still denying the existence of or trying to bargain with the existential threat. It'll never happen. It'll not be that bad. Cooler heads will prevail. The usual rubbish. I used to sit in the cinema thinking, this isn't very believable. Real people don't act as dumb. Shows what I know. Real politicians seem to be quite a bit dumber than fictional ones much of the time. We've just watched the nations of the world come together at COP, yet again, and fail to agree to take the actions that the scientific consensus says will be necessary to preserve our very civilizations. For all that the blah, blah, blah that comes out of their mouths seems to indicate that they now agree that the scientists are right, they just aren't willing to do what needs doing. And then they all flew home in what amount to massive Pringles tubes with wings, travelling at nearly the speed of sound, without the slightest hesitation that the science that keeps them in the sky is correct. I bet every one of them heeded the scientific consensus that it was a good idea to close the door before they took off. It is time we stood up as a nation and said enough is enough. We aren't going to wait for independence. We aren't going to wait until we have all the legislative powers we want. We are going to start taking the sort of action that must be taken, and to heck with anyone else. We shouldn't be content to meet the milquetoast targets those enthralled to the fossil fuel lobby have set. We shouldn't even set our ambition at the levels that IPCC says we all need to hit. We need to grow some backbone and set levels that far exceed that, levels that will prove that not only is a sustainable, well-being economy possible, but that such an economy is capable of flourishing in a way that the rapacious, extractive, outdated 20th century economic model cannot ever hope to do. We should lead the way, show others how it is done so that they can join us, and we should stop humouring the bad actors that hope to squeeze one last cup of profit out of the old system at the expense of the rest of us while the world burns. We should stop exporting exploitation and unsustainable practices to third world countries. We should account for our carbon footprint wherever it falls on this earth. We should put an end to companies that profit from destroying our ecosystem at the expense of domestic industries that are sustainable and don't just chuck their toxic waste in the street. A practice would be illegal here. We should ensure imports made using that practice are subject to punitive taxation. And the money should go to local authorities to fund the transformation of our homes, businesses, and way of life. None of this will be easy. No particular element of it will be sufficient. But it will all be necessary if our children and grandchildren are to have a world to live in. There are 2 amendments in. The first is fine in my opinion. The second deletes text that is important and adds something that risks becoming a hostage to fortune. We shouldn't be following the rest of the world. We should be leading it. It's time to stop acting like a nation in waiting and act like one that other nations want to emulate.
Thank you to Chris and Susan, and apologies for disappearing off screen there, delegates. I think a few technical gremlins in the system. Our next speakers to propose Amendment A to Resolution number 23 are Councillor Kate Campbell, proposing the resolution, and Councillor Adam McVeigh to second. So welcome them both.
Conference, carbon emissions from homes represent around a third of all emissions. So getting all homes across Scotland to net zero is absolutely crucial to hitting our targets. And there's 2 ways that you reduce the carbon footprint of a home. You reduce the need for energy by improving the fabric of the building to make it more energy efficient, and you change from gas to a sustainable heat source. And there's two categories of buildings that we need to address. There's existing homes and there's new build homes. And actually, in the grand scheme of things, new build homes are fairly straightforward. It will require a change of legislation and build costs will go up, but land value will come down, so it should balance out. And building in energy efficiency is far, far cheaper to do at a design phase than once a home is built. Carbon-free heating also is much better as communal heating systems, and so again really needs to be built in at the design phase. And we know that we need to make these changes across all homes in Scotland to meet our targets, so we must move quickly on standards for new builds. I'm really proud to be able to say that every home from now on that's in design and development being built by Edinburgh Council will be a net zero home. These are council homes, so if we can do it, then private sector house builders can too, and many want to. But legislating is really important because it levels the playing field. The costs will largely be borne on land value, as I've said, so shouldn't fall on house buyers. And if we don't legislate, then even those private house builders that want to move into the sustainable space won't be able to, because they'll be undercut by their competition either at the point of buying land to develop or at the point of sale. And this will also help councils and social housing providers, because lower construction costs of new build homes will happen if all homes have to be energy efficient, and that becomes the standard way of constructing homes. So we need to make these changes soon, because once buildings are built, then they fall into the retrofit category, and that is where the really big challenge sits. Retrofitting homes to improve energy efficiency and to change the heat source will be very costly and challenging. We're looking at this again for our own stock in Edinburgh Council, and we have around 20,000 homes. So that means that we've got resources we can put into it, something that individual homeowners just don't have. For us, Right to Buy in Edinburgh means that many of our council homes are in stairs with bought properties. And for councils to meet the energy efficiency standards for social housing, this means that we have to improve the whole block, because a lot of the things that will make a home energy efficient are things like external fabrics, roofs, windows and doors, and that's key to improving energy efficiency. So that means that we have to take homeowners with us. And it has to work with energy efficiency and with changing the heat source. So for a large-scale landlord like the council, this is pretty challenging, but it's going to be near impossible for individuals, especially when there are lots of homeowners in one block of flats who need to coordinate, and it's going to be especially hard for people on low incomes. So we need to start to plan now how we can upfront fund costs for feasibility studies and design work. And again, the council is looking at piloting models for typical building types that we have in Edinburgh, where we have lots of social housing. And we absolutely will share this learning, but it's not going to cover all building types. And people need to understand before they start on the measures what the costs might be and what the best solutions for their type of building might be. And we need to make sure that there are the right subsidies in place for people who just can't afford to fund the changes. And this is a very, very big piece of work, so it must be led by government. So conference, please support the amendment.
Well, I want to thank West Fife and Coastal Villages branch for bringing this motion forward, and also associate myself with the contribution of the last speaker, who very clearly laid out all the relevant issues. Edinburgh, and I do want to set out a little bit more context, Edinburgh is aiming to become a net zero city by 2030. It's a hard ask, but it's the right challenge for ourselves to meet our environmental obligations to future generations. If we are to limit global temperature rises to 1.5 degrees, we have to almost halve global emissions by 2030. That means some will have to go faster than others, and those who can must. Edinburgh generates the equivalent right now of about 2.3 million tonnes of carbon every year, and the world will not stay on course for a 1.5 degree rise unless cities like Edinburgh embrace change and drive down carbon emissions. Some will undoubtedly change slower, but Edinburgh and cities like us, being a centre of innovation, capable of leveraging international finance and having the much needed skills to support that transition, frankly, have no excuse, and we must go as fast as we can. But in order to hit net zero by 2030, Edinburgh needs to retrofit 120,000 homes within our capital city. Now, as we've already heard from last speaker, that's about reducing energy demand and how much energy it takes to heat our houses and flats within the city, but it's also about the source of that energy and moving towards sustainable sources. We need investment at scale to help us deliver, and the council can't deliver on our own. Our residents can't deliver on their own, even with help of the council and other local groups that are supporting them. We need an international and national package programme, a massive programme of public investment standing behind our local actions. And it's by pursuing the UK government for a genuine legacy through COP, and that genuine investment package from COP, supported and enabled by the Scottish Government to help us deliver on the ground, that will enable us to hit that globally significant target that Edinburgh and other cities are racing towards. We have a track record to be proud of in Edinburgh, an £800 million investment plan for council homes, 11% reduction in emissions from the council this year alone, an 8% reduction across our entire city in emissions. The whole city has reduced emissions and also led globally by being listed one of the 95 global cities leading on climate action with an A-star rating. We've had that recognition because of our hard work. Conference, let's build on our progress to date. Please support the motion with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam, and thank you, Kate. And next, delegates to propose Amendment B, and speakers have a limit of 3 minutes. We have Bill Ramsey from Southside Central Branch. So welcome, Bill. Now, Bill, I can't hear you. I wonder if you are on mute. Bear with us, delegates. Bill is looking to see if he can sort that out his end.
Yeah, I've sorted it out, I think.
You have. Go ahead, Bill.
I will now pull up my speech. My apologies, colleagues. Where do we go? Right. Good morning, delegates. The phrase in the unamended motion, whatever it takes, can be a useful line in a speech to express urgency or the gravity. And in that sense, I wholeheartedly share the sense of urgency in the resolution. However, the wording is of less use when formulating an actual policy position, which is what annual conference is about. On the other hand, if it was put there to encourage discourse, the framers of the motion have achieved that. After all, climate change is the primary issue of the day, of the year, indeed, for the rest of the century. Conference, turning to the Trade Union Group amendment, that introduces some specificity in this regard. It reads, Conference resolves to support all positions on this issue agreed by the General Assembly of the United Nations. Why the General Assembly? Because of all the United Nations fora, the UN, the General Assembly is the one most likely to give the countries most affected a real voice. Indeed, the chaos is already with them, with us to some extent, but certainly with them, and it's going to get worse for decades, and I mean for decades, before there is any significant chance of the situation getting any better. The General Assembly is the UN forum that has a consistent track record in challenging the so-called realpolitik of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. A good right now example of the effectiveness of the General Assembly is the growing success of the new treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons, which we dealt with in our August conference. And even in the opposition, albeit gradually eroding opposition of the permanent members of the Security Council, that treaty will have its first COP, actually, in March in Vienna. I hope to attend as a civic representative from Scotland. There are many other examples of the centrality of the General Assembly, including the right of self-determination, the position that underpins the very rationale of our party. So by including this amendment, it gives us a little more focus. We're not suggesting that there are other fora that can be incorporated as well. But the United Nations has primacy in challenging global chaos effectively, and the General Assembly within the UN has primacy within the UN. So please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. And delegates to second Amendment B is Simon Barrow of the SNP Trade Union Group. Welcome, Simon.
Conference, the heart of this motion is absolutely solid. As the IPCC has stated, the climate emergency is a code red situation for the whole planet. Yet, as we saw at COP26, the world's most powerful politicians, the big corporations and the military continue to obfuscate and delay when it comes to decisive action. Scotland is a small nation, but we can and must take the lead in pursuing the largest actors and persuading them to change course. We can only do that if our own actions match our words and if we're operating as truly global players. The point of this small but important amendment is to substitute an aspirational phrase about doing what it takes with concrete action, namely backing the international commitments being made through the United Nations and in particular its General Assembly. Of course, the key alignment in this motion is with the critical and detailed demands of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. This is the UN's expert-led body for assessing the science related to global warming and the action needed to avert impending catastrophe. But the UN General Assembly also plays a vital role because it is the key space in the international system where the voices of the global south are heard loudest, calling out the inaction of the G20, demanding action now to save lives and livelihoods, and amplifying the voice and influence of the Secretary-General. Conference, as we move ever closer towards independence, Scotland's voice needs to be heard on the international stage. We need to be acting in concert with other small nations and lending our voice in support of the poorest, those most vulnerable to rising sea levels and new extremes of heat and drought. This amendment makes that point loudly and clearly. I urge you to pass it and the motion.
Thank you very much, Simon, and to all speakers on this resolution. So Conference will now move on to voting. So we will vote firstly on Amendment A, and then we will go on and vote on Amendment B, and then we will go on and look at the resolution. So firstly, voting on Amendment A to Resolution 23, Climate and Ecological Emergency. Please vote now. Thank you, delegates. And on Amendment A to Resolution 23, with 262 votes in favour of the amendment and 22 votes against, the amendment passes overwhelmingly. So we now go on to vote on Amendment B to Resolution 23. So again, delegates, please cast your vote now. Thank you very much, delegates. So for Amendment B to Resolution 23, Climate and Ecological Emergency, the amendment passes substantially with 247 votes in favour and 47 against. So we can now move, delegates, on to Resolution 23 to vote on that resolution, which is entitled Climate and Ecological Emergency, as amended by Amendments A and B. So for Resolution 23 as amended, please vote now. Thank you very much, Conference. And resolution number 23, which was entitled Climate and Ecological Emergency, as amended, passes overwhelmingly with 301 votes for and 12 votes against. So next, delegates, we will move on to resolution number 24, which is entitled Preservation of Inshore Fisheries and Habitat. And that will be proposed by Catherine Murphy of Kirkcaldy branch, who is a first-time speaker at conference. So welcome to Catherine.
Conference, the sea belongs to all of us and we all have a stake in its well-being. Unfortunately, our marine stocks are being seriously overfished and the underwater environment destroyed by bottom dredging and trawling. The Scottish Government has control of 12 nautical miles around our coast, and the executive agency in charge of fisheries is obliged to follow policy set out in the National Marine Plan and Marine Act Scotland 2010. The National Performance Framework states that by 2020 there will be, I'll have to start again, sorry Richie.
That's all right, no worries. Again, anytime you're starting again, if you just say your name and then pause before you start again.
Okay, right, I'm going to see if I can slow this slightly down. Okay, Catherine Murphy. Conference, the sea belongs to all of us and we all have a stake in its well-being. Unfortunately, our marine stocks are being seriously overfished and the underwater environment destroyed by bottom dredging and trawling. The Scottish Government has control of 12 nautical miles around our coast, and the executive agency in charge of fisheries is obliged to follow policies set out in the National Marine Plan, and Marine Act Scotland 2010. The National Performance Framework states that by 2020, there will be effective regulation of harvesting and overfishing, thus reducing unregulated and destructive fishing practices. Addressing economic objectives and managed fisheries, Marine Scotland's policy unit is not delivering substantive measures to deliver ecosystem recovery, such as enlarged marine protected areas with appropriate enforcement, inshore limit and bottom towed fishing and vessel tracking. The Priority Marine Feature Review betrayed some equivocation on the Government's intention to protect habitats. However, on a positive note, the Scottish Government acted immediately by creating an emergency marine protected area when local divers in Loch Carron spotted a dredger working on a flame shell reef and reported their concerns. Scottish National Heritage divers investigated in conjunction with Marine Scotland, noting that the flame shells were a priority marine feature and were duly safeguarded using emergency powers. There seems to be an uncoordinated approach to marine protected areas, which covers 20% of our coasts, but only 5% is actually off limits to illegal dredging. Dredging turns up the seabed, releasing carbon dioxide into the water, resulting in acidification which impacts wildlife. For example, mussel and crab shells dissolve and fish larvae lose their ability to smell and avoid predators. Our Seas Coalition, a campaign group which consists of 69 organisations formed in 2018 in Mull to address the issue of illegal damage to the coastline, advocate the return of a new inshore limit on bottom trawling combined with effective boat tracking systems, giving preference to vessels with lower environmental impact, which would bring sustainable employment and conserve coastal marine biodiversity. This would in turn have a positive impact on the socio-economic importance for food, well-being and leisure. Please see ScotGov's Giant Strike 2020. In order to achieve resolution to these problems, it will require meaningful dialogue with fishermen, conservationists and scientists together with government in order to create a viable and sustainable marine habitat and fishing industry, ensuring a just transition for those affected. ScotGov has missed 11 of the 15 indicators used to measure good environmental states as outlined in the National Performance Framework relating to cetaceans, harbour seals, breeding seabirds, fish, pelagic and intertidal habitats, non-Indigenous species, food webs, litter and underwater noise. The Scottish Government sets the bar high, but we must do more to achieve our aims. Instead of trawl and dredge fishing, destroying the seabed, including the nursery environments for juvenile fish, crabs, lobsters, etc., we can have hand-dyed scallops, creel cod crab and lobster, so preserving Scotland the brand as a premium product on the world stage. Conference. I call on the Scottish Government to stop the chronic destruction of the coastal seabed by immediately reinstating limits to the bottom trawling and dredge fishing in the 1984 Act, which has allowed the destruction of the inshore habitat, resulting in reduced fish and crustacean population, impacting on the local community, biodiversity and sustainability. The sea soothes our souls. It's now time to save the sea. It gives me great pleasure to move the resolution.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And to second resolution number 24, we have Finlay McFarlane of Edinburgh Western Branch. Welcome, Finlay.
Good morning, conference, and thanks to the branches who brought this crucially important motion to the stage. I mean, as someone who's tried for many years to bring the kind of talk about marine conservation and preservation to this floor, it's no mean feat at all. I appreciate it's not the sexiest of motions to talk about inshore vessel monitoring systems. However, you know, it's important, delegates, that you do vote these motions incredibly highly when you see them, because the time for change is now. I'm speaking in favour of this motion. It's a hugely important statement of intent and an acknowledgement of overfishing. Some in the industry might say, you know, I've trawled these seas for many years and my catch is fine, but the day will come that it won't be. It's about supporting and incentivising sustainable fishing practices. Conference, one of the most destructive practices that we have in Scotland is bottom trawling for prawns or scallops. It's akin to inviting a bull into the china shop. You only need to look at Locharan's legal disaster, wherein this heavy machinery was dragged through the seafloor of a flameshell reef, causing destruction in its wake. It was absolutely heartbreaking. Sea stars missing limbs, smashed shells, a desert left in its wake. Indeed, our fishermen from the front lines are reporting this back too. A fisherman just recently in the press quoted that it was just that. It's just like a desert down there. There's nothing left. Just think about that for a moment. Short-term cash cannot be more important than long-term viability. And I fear that asking Marine Scotland to use the powers that it has is like asking a man with no teeth to chew a toffee. Scotland's fisheries need to be managed in the public interest. We know that long-term there are benefits to allowing our seas to recover. Profit margins from cod fishing are nearly double that from the destructive prawn trawling, for example. But it's important as well that it doesn't rest on the fisherman's head to make that just transition. It's time to bring the focus back. In 2019, we promised a review which would limit the damage by dredging. Let's deliver it. We promised to implement vessel tracking so that we know when and where and for how long these boats go in the inshore by 2019. Let's deliver it. Conference, excuse the pun, but it's time to save what we cannot see. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Finlay. And Finlay was our final speaker on Resolution 24, so we will now go on to vote. So for Resolution 24, Preservation of Inshore Fisheries and Habitats, please vote now. Thank you very much, Conference. And for resolution number 24, which was entitled Preservation of Inshore Fisheries and Habitat, the resolution passes overwhelmingly by 342 votes to 3. And that takes us on to the first of today's topical and emergency resolutions, and this one is entitled Global Vaccination Strategy. It will be proposed by Bill Ramsey of Southside Central Branch, so welcome, Bill.
Hello again, conference delegates. The appearance of a new, potentially more threatening variant is sobering, but it's not at all surprising. Had the world collectively been prepared to develop a global strategy to suppress and possibly eliminate COVID, it's likely we would not be facing yet another wave of the virus at this time. Delegates, we all know that the military-industrial complex profits handsomely from endless wars. Now we know beyond doubt the same applies to what is increasingly referred to as the medical-industrial complex, Big Pharma. This industrial complex is not primarily interested in bringing the war against COVID to a victorious conclusion. It seems that elements of Big Pharma appear to favour an endless struggle with the disease. After all, more variants means more profits, like the military-industrial complex. The medical-industrial complex seems to be infected by a similar pathological strain. Short-term profit with deadly characteristics in the medium to long term. Conference, as the emergency motion points out, the medical industrial complex has its political defenders too, like Prime Minister Johnson and even Chancellor Merkel, who are resisting demonetising the patents on the vaccines and the patents on the vaccine processes. Delegates should be forgiven if you had somehow got the impression that the sums are too vast for a global effort against COVID. However, it turns out the cost in a global context is not as vast as you might think, thanks to the work done by that well-known bastion of anti-capitalist sentiment, the International Monetary Fund. The IMF colleagues have estimated that a proper global vaccine programme would only cost $50 billion. To put that in context, $50 billion is 1/2% of the $9 trillion that central banks, like mentioned in the motion, like the central banks have created in recent years. And much of the money created was then largely gifted to the corporate world, who in turn turned much of it into share buyouts. You know about that. Indeed, as Tim Rideout pointed out to me yesterday, apparently the Johnson administration had the Bank of England create the equivalent of $48 billion to give to Circa to create a test and trace system. The forever war against COVID needs to be brought to a successful conclusion. Our NHS was not configured to operate at the current tempo forever. Of course, the medical industrial complex are well aware of that, probably already estimating the profits for them if the NHS eventually buckles. In conclusion, delegates, the medical industrial complex needs to be brought to heel as its deadly pathological short-term profit motive needs to be suppressed and then eliminated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. I have with us, I hope, on audio only to second this topical and emergency resolution, Stephanie Callaghan, MSP. So welcome to Stephanie.
Thanks very much, Convener, and good morning, Conference. Today I'm lucky enough to have 2 sore arms and a bit of a headache, and I say lucky because yesterday afternoon I rolled up my sleeves for my COVID booster vaccination and my flu vaccination too, and I thanked our NHS workers for all their efforts to protect us in the face of COVID-19. Many people across the world aren't so lucky though. Too many don't have access to the COVID vaccine, and that's a real tragedy for them and for us too, because none of us are safe until we're all safe. Today's motion calls on all our SNP elected members, MSPs, MPs and local councillors to put political pressure on Western governments worldwide to establish and fund a coherent and effective global vaccination strategy. Surely we all owe it to our fellow human beings to share our expertise on COVID-19 with the rest of the world too. It's the right thing to do and the moral thing to do. We know that every time this virus infects another person, it has yet another opportunity to mutate and change. The mutations are normal for a virus, they happen all the time, and many of those changes aren't dangerous. But some mutations wreak havoc, and the Delta variant gripped our nation this time last year, ruining family Christmas plans, filling up hospital beds, taking lives, and adding to the numbers with long COVID. We must help the United Nations tackle this issue before new variants spread further and faster, locally and across the world. The latest variant, Omicron, is worrying governments everywhere, and I thank the South African government for their openness and honesty for sharing their concerns right away with us. The UK government have rightly reintroduced some of the restrictions that here in Scotland our First Minister had the sense to keep in place, and Scotland is already aligned with the UK-wide border restrictions in red zones. This virus is with us in Scotland already, this new strain, and our scientists are working flat out to learn about its severity, transmissibility, and response to treatments and vaccines. There are now 6 confirmed cases here, 4 of those in Lanarkshire where I live, and there are another 2 close by in Greater Glasgow and Clyde. We can and we simply must do more, and the obvious logical answer is to organise and fund how we tackle this virus in every country, maximising the number of people vaccinated on a worldwide scale, because if we don't, we might never beat COVID. In closing conference, I urge you to vote for the resolution for the health and well-being of our families, friends and neighbours at home and across the world. And please roll up your own sleeve for the COVID-19 vaccination programme and encourage others to do the same. As I said earlier, none of us are safe until we are all safe. Thank you, conference.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And Stephanie was our final speaker on this resolution. So we will now go to vote. So for the topical and emergency resolution entitled Global Vaccination Strategy, please locate your voting buttons and vote now. Thank you very much, Conference. And for the first topical and emergency resolution today, which was entitled Global Vaccination Strategy, with 348 votes in favour and 10 against, the resolution passes overwhelmingly. So we'll move on next to our next topical and emergency resolution, and this one is entitled Scotland's Share of Bind Scotland Northern Ireland Proposal. And this resolution will be moved by Richard Thompson MP. So welcome to Richard.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, Conference. When Boris Johnson announced plans to build a fixed link between Scotland and Northern Ireland, it was rightly approached with a degree of scepticism. My favourite response to it, though, wasn't the political response. It actually came from a seafood restaurant in Northern Ireland, which went on Twitter to promise a free meal for life to anyone who actually travelled through the tunnel or across the bridge from Scotland to Northern Ireland. And they promised that in the near certainty that their money was safe. And with the publication of the Hendy Review last week, we can see just exactly how safe that money was. Of course, it should come to us as absolutely no surprise that this was always going to be a non-starter. Boris Johnson, in case we forget, was the man who, when he was Mayor of London, couldn't even manage to build a bridge successfully from one side of the River Thames to the other. So the idea that, as Prime Minister, he'd be able to give the political oversight to a project to link Scotland and Northern Ireland in this way would be absolutely laughable if it hadn't been such a blatantly transparent ploy to divert attention from the negative impact that Brexit and the Northern Ireland Protocol has had on both sides of the North Channel. Now, the engineering challenges in building that link were enormous, not just because of the trench at Beaufort's Dyke, not just because of the distance, not just because of the munitions that had been dumped there over the years. Obviously, that was a huge task that was going to be unsurmountable. But if you were going to try and get round it, it was going to come at an enormous cost. And the Hendy Review found a figure that was coming close to £300 billion in order to do that. Now, £300 billion spent wisely would transform not just Scottish, but Northern Irish transport infrastructure. In fact, it would probably buy just about every single adult in Scotland and Northern Ireland a Tesla electric car with money to spare. But our ask, Conference, in this motion is far more modest, but no less ambitious. And it's simply to set aside the £20 billion that was initially forecast for the project and the original estimate, and to give Scotland its share of that so that we can start to tackle our own infrastructure issues from the northeast to the southwest and all other points on the compass in between. Now, I don't want to be prescriptive on that because, unlike the Prime Minister, unlike this Westminster government, I respect devolution and the right of the Scottish Government to set policy in line with the priorities of the people of Scotland. But Scotland's share of that £20 billion would allow roads to be improved where they need to be. It would allow us to decarbonise our rail network, as the Scottish Government is committed to doing. But not only that, to extend our rail network into the parts of the country that have been left without rail network since the beaching cuts of the 1960s. But more than that, it could also allow us to invest positively the length and breadth of Scotland in active travel. And it could also allow us to invest in securing and re-establishing some of the crucial international links that we miss, giving us a Brexit bypass through direct ferry links to the continent and supporting that. I think, Conference, we've had quite enough devolution power grabs or attempted power grabs from this clueless, feckless government that we have to endure at Westminster. Now, we all know that the only way that we can start to really transform Scotland and to build and secure the recovery that we want is through having the full financial and policy powers that come through independence. That's what we're about. That's what we want. Until we secure that referendum victory to give us independence and those full fiscal and policy powers, we need to be making sure we're getting our fair share. If there was £20 billion for this, then there should still be £20 billion on the table. And the UK government should hand it over so that Scotland, through its proper devolved government, its legitimate devolved government, can get on with the task of building Scotland and connecting Scotland to itself and to others in exactly the manner that we need. Please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And to second this topical resolution, and with a time limit of 3 minutes, we have Marie Todd MSP. Welcome to Marie.
Thank you, Conference. Conference, our Prime Minister has exceptional form for unrealistic and grandiose projects. It's part of the bumbling, shambolic persona he's created to distract us from the corrupt cronyism that is endemic in his government. He's a man with very few credible plans, but he wants to appear to be getting things done. Last week, his proposed crossing linking Scotland to Northern Ireland was rejected for being vastly expensive and fraught with difficulties. Personally, I love the idea of stronger connections with Ireland, but we all knew the Boris Bridge was fraught with difficulties. The sea is wide and deep there, and the bridge would need to be bomb-proof as well as weatherproof, thanks to the trench full of World War II munitions that's dumped on the route. This fantasy bridge proposal from Boris Johnson shows the contempt that he and his Tory party hold for Scotland. They imagine that we'll be satisfied with ludicrous proposals like this. Conference, with Westminster control, Scotland gets cuts and broken promises on an endless loop. Now, I would happily break that cycle. But if Westminster wants to turbocharge our infrastructure investment, they can start by stumping up our share of the 20 billion proposed for this bridge, allocate it to Holyrood and respect devolution, not undermine it at every turn. If Boris Johnson wants Scotland to believe that this bonkers scheme was ever anything other than a distraction from the daily grim goings-on in Westminster, he needs to put his money where his mouth is and allocate our share of the 20 billion to Holyrood. That would show us he meant business. It would mean hundreds of millions for my local authority area, Highland. And instead of spending over our heads, it would show some respect for the people of Scotland and the government that we chose. Conference, support the resolution.
Thank you very much, Marie. And Marie was our final speaker on this topical resolution. So let's move on to voting now. So for the topical and emergency resolution entitled Scotland's Share of Binned Scotland Northern Ireland Proposal, please cast your vote now. Thank you very much, delegates. And with 372 votes in favour and 7 votes against, the topical and emergency resolution on Scotland's share of the Bin Scotland Northern Ireland proposal passes overwhelmingly. And that takes us to the final topical and emergency resolution today, which is entitled Human Rights. And this resolution will be moved by Roger Mullen of Kirkcaldy Branch. So welcome to Roger.
Good afternoon, Conference. As I speak to you, I cannot be certain that 38-year-old citizen journalist Zhang Zhang is still alive. As a former lawyer and young journalist, she was one of the first to report on the COVID-19 outbreak in Wuhan. She is now languishing in jail and on hunger strike. I am moving this resolution to allow the SNP to add its voice to calls in recent days from the United Nations, Amnesty International, the European Union and others for the immediate and unconditional release of Zhang and to make urgent life-saving medical care available to her. Zhang is one of 4 citizen journalists jailed in China for the crime of, and I quote, picking quarrels and provoking trouble, unquote. A crime of picking quarrels for sharing much needed information at the early stages of a global pandemic. As a citizen journalist, she had traveled to Wuhan in February 2020 to report on what was happening at the COVID-19 epicenter. She questioned the authorities' handling of the outbreak in her smartphone videos, and she was not alone in doing so. As Conference will be well aware, transparency about the pandemic, its causes, its mutations, its effects, is a key to building the knowledge we all need to respond appropriately. In passing, I want to pay tribute to the South African authorities for their willingness to be open and share information with the world as soon as they detected the new Omicron strain of COVID-19. Such openness and transparency is both welcome and essential. However, for Zhang, rather than being respected as a young citizen journalist, she was detained and sentenced to 4 years imprisonment. She is on hunger strike in response, and her family have said she is close to death. On humanitarian grounds alone, she should be immediately released and cared for. The United Nations has called for her release, and UN spokeswoman Marta Hurtado has pointed out that the free flow of relevant information is of particular importance in the early stages of crisis situations such as public health emergencies. Zhang was serving the wider public good. She was sharing information that should be shared in the midst of a public health crisis. She deserves support from all of humanity. Conference, let us add our voice to calls for her immediate and unconditional release before it is too late. I commend the resolution to Conference.
Thank you very much, Roger. And Roger was the final speaker on this resolution, which has been formally seconded by Stuart MacDonald MP. So we will now move on to vote. So on the topical and emergency resolution entitled Human Rights, please vote now. Thank you, Conference. And the topical and emergency resolution entitled Human Rights passes overwhelmingly by 378 votes to 4. And that takes us to a lovely part of Annual National Conference as we bring you the SNP Awards.
A very warm welcome to everyone logged in for this part of conference, which celebrates the achievement not just of our outstanding award winners, but of everyone who is working so hard for the cause of independence and for our party. I speak virtually at the moment to lots of branches and constituencies, and I know that the SNP is full of people whose dedication and commitment is an inspiration and an example to us all. These are the people who by word and deed are always going the extra mile to make sure that Scotland chooses a better future. And it's a great privilege to have the chance, by honouring just a few of them just now, to honour all who do so, day in and day out, in every part of the country. So thanks for joining me and our sponsors, Community Wind Power Scotland, for the SNP's annual awards for 2021. This ceremony is of course a highlight of our calendar, and we and Community Wind Power, who were delighted to have as our sponsors yet again, were determined that it was going to happen, no matter the difficulties and the necessary restrictions. Community Wind Power is of course at the forefront of wind energy, with over 1 gigawatt built, under construction and in development. As renewable energy specialists, they are leaders in the identification, design, development, construction and operation of onshore wind energy projects. They are also an example of what Scotland needs as we move towards our greener future. So please extend the warmest of SNP welcomes to our sponsors, Community Wind Power Scotland, as they take us through this year's awards and introduce us to the award winners themselves.
Hello and welcome everyone to the SNP Annual Awards 2021. I do hope that everyone is well and has managed to get back into some sort of normality during this challenging year. However, we are delighted to be supporting the awards again this year to celebrate and acknowledge the great achievements of the SNP members. We are ready to announce the awards and our teams are poised at our wind farms around Scotland. But I wanted a moment of your time to reinforce the climate emergency that we are all facing. Scotland is showing the way with a world-leading carbon reduction target, which other countries are now following. COP26 showed us there was still much to do in the global fight against climate change, and we at Community Wind Power are proud to play a modest but important part in that, with our 8 operational wind farms in Scotland, which now power the equivalent of around 1.5 million homes each and every year. We are particularly proud of our most recent project, Ecological 2A Community Wind Farm, which despite being constructed and commissioned during a challenging period has now started to deliver clean, green energy for Scotland. This renewable energy project provided employment and inward investment in the local area, while other projects stalled due to the pandemic. We have also continued to deliver our community benefit funds to our host communities, and this year saw our total donations exceed £6 million. We have supported legacy projects in Abbott and Bathans with a new community hall being built, and in Copath, where a community hub and shop have been created. However, please remember the fight against climate change is still ongoing and we can all play our part. Be proud that Scotland is leading by example with one of the most ambitious net zero targets in the world. But remember, there is still much to do and many difficult decisions to be made that will benefit each one of us in the future as we push towards net zero and keeping the planet safe. Thank you, and over to our teams at the wind farms.
Hello, I'm Tom Downey, Operations Supervisor for Millerhill and Wadlawwood Community Wind Farms. High up on the hills above Dalry and overlooking the beautiful Ayrshire coast, Wadlawwood provides clean energy for distillers Edrington, producers of the famous Mclennan whisky. We are delighted to be part of the SNP Annual Awards for 2021 and pleased to announce the SNP Activist of the Year Award. This activist has been party member for 55 years with their unrivalled enthusiasm and support is legendary within the party. The winner of the SNP Activist of the Year Award 2021 is Ian Douglas, Aries branch. Congratulations, Ian, well done.
I would like to thank the members who put my name forward for this award. I do not know who you are. I joined in 1966 during George Leslie's Pollock campaign and was a full-time worker in the 1967 Hamilton campaign, running the loudspeaker, My Car. This year it's been a back-office task producing thousands of full-colour printed letters and running Activate. Thank you for this honour.
Hi there, and a windy welcome to Ecological Wind Farm. It's been a busy year here on the wind farm, but I'm glad to say we've completed our third wind farm here on the East Coast, working alongside our Scottish partners to deliver cleaner, greener electricity for Scotland. We're delighted to be involved and pleased to announce this year's SNP Branch of the Year, having had a new MSP and an MP elected within 11 days of each other. Airdrie and Shotts branch. Well done, Airdrie and Shotts.
Wow, this is fantastic. Thank you so much to those of you who chose the Airdrie and Shotts branch as the SNP's branch of the year this year. It's a fantastic achievement for our branch. We've had a cracking year, winning both the Scottish parliamentary election and of course the Westminster by-election as well, and this is, you know, a real credit to the amazing campaigners that we have within the branch. And you know, I've been touring around virtually the SNP branches across Scotland as part of the Social Justice and Fairness Commission report tour, if you like, and I've been able to see some phenomenal work that is going on across the SNP, across Scotland. And so for the Airdrie and Shotts branch to be recognised with this award really is just so special, and I'm so grateful. On behalf of the branch, thank you very much indeed.
Hello again, this time from Ecological 2A Community Wind Farm. This is our newest wind farm and it utilises the most up-to-date design and technology to transform wind power into electrical energy. These 19 turbines will play their part in helping Scotland achieve its 2045 net zero target. We're delighted to be part of the SNP Annual Awards once again, and very pleased to announce that the winner of the SNP Councillor of the Year is Councillor Heather Anderson of the Scottish Borders Council. Well done, congratulations.
Thank you. When HQ phoned me about this award, I asked them to check that they had the right Heather Anderson. There are a few Heather Andersons in the SNP, and I'm very chuffed that in this instance I was the right one. I am so honoured to receive this award. I spend a lot of my life with SNP councillors. I know how amazing they are, how hard they work, how committed they are to our cause and their communities. It's never too late in the evening to phone them, and there's rarely a day when they're not working. So this is for all of us who go above and beyond, and I'm so proud to be this year's winner. Thank you very much.
Hello again from Ecological Community Wind Farm. This year, on top of all our other projects, we've been able to complete 2 community projects in Coburn's Path and Abbey St Bathams, in the form of a new hub and shop and a new community hall. We're very proud to support the local community on these projects. Now to the award. We are delighted to announce that the winner of Parliamentarian of the Year for 2021 is Annam Kaiser for Airdrie and Shotts. Well done, congratulations.
I'm absolutely delighted to accept this award as SNP Parliamentarian of the Year. It was a lovely surprise, and so thank you so much to everyone who nominated me. I am looking forward to just continuing the good fight down in Westminster, holding the Conservative government to account for their draconian bills such as the anti-refugee bill and their policies that hit the most vulnerable in society, like the cut in universal credit. And of course, fighting and continuing the campaign for Scottish independence. And thank you once again so much, and I hope everyone's enjoying conference.
Good evening, I'm Paul Mclennan, the MSP for East Lothian. I'm delighted to be here tonight to present the Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm here at Ecological wind farm in my constituency. It produces 190 megawatts with 54 turbines. I'm delighted to present the award on behalf of Community Wind Power, who have worked with many projects in my constituency over a number of years. The winner for this award was in the Scottish Parliament from 1999 to 2021, holding many ministerial and Cabinet Secretary posts. Her last role was that of Cabinet Secretary for Environment and Climate Change. In that time she made Scotland a world leader in tackling climate change. I'm delighted to announce the winner of the Lifetime Achievement Award is Rosanna Cunningham.
This is absolutely surreal. I can hardly believe that the 15-year-old girl that wrote to the SNP over half a century ago is standing here receiving this award. I thank everybody enormously for this. I can hardly believe it. And I'm looking forward to the SNP's own Lifetime Achievement Award when we win independence for Scotland.
Hello again. It's great to see the people's positive reactions to receiving those awards. It's wonderful to see their efforts rewarded. Congratulations to all those who received an award, and also to the respective teams who will, no doubt, have been working hard in the background. Thank you also to our team at Community Wind Power for all their hard work and braving those elements in Scotland. However, one final reminder. Please remember the fight against climate change. We can all play our part. I will now hand over to the First Minister and Party Leader, Nicola Sturgeon, MSP, for an announcement about the Special Recognition Awards. First Minister.
A very special and massive thank you to our sponsors, Community Wind Power, and huge congratulations to Ian, Heather, Annam, Rosanna, and members of Airdrie and Shotts for all your incredible work and dedication to the cause. It's my real honour and privilege to announce our Special Recognition Award for 2021. This year, this award goes to two very, very special people, sadly, posthumously. This award is going firstly to Jim Lynch, the editor of the Scots Independent, somebody who gave so much over so many years to our cause and who is so hugely missed. And secondly, to the irreplaceable, irrepressible Callum Cashley, an activist known to many of us, again, somebody who brought so much to the independence cause. Jim and Callum will always be missed, but this award goes to them with our thanks, our gratitude and our love.
Hi, I just want to say thanks very much on behalf of my family, particularly my mum, to everyone who's been involved in giving Dad this award. He'd really have appreciated it, especially from all the people he knew over the years in the SNP. Thanks very much.
Hello, I'm Laura, Callum's wife, and if you hear any noises in the background, that will be our daughter, Rosa. Pretty overwhelmed to accept this award today on Callum's behalf. Callum dedicated so much of his life to the cause of independence. I think he delivered his first leaflet as a primary school kid, so it's pretty touching to receive this award today. And of course, all of Callum's campaigning was carried out within the SNP family. And I use the word family because the support we received from the party both during Callum's illness and after his death has been pretty exceptional, from letters, cards, from activists throughout the country, as well as practical help. And here from SNP friends in Edinburgh and Leith, you carried us through a very testing time. So thank you for that, and thank you for acknowledging Callum's contribution. We miss him all the time, but it's really nice to have this reminder of his work for Scotland. And here's Rosa. I'm going to say hello, darling. Yeah?
And we'll be back next year, 2022, with more inspirational award winners. I can announce today that we will have a new category, Staffer of the Year, in memory of the one and only Callum Cashley. And we'll be dedicating Activist of the Year to the wonderful John Clark. Both Callum and John are hugely missed. Until then, happy campaigning. We have independence to win. Let's get on and do that.
That was fantastic to see. And now, conference, please welcome our party leader and First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, MSP.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the SNP's annual conference, an occasion much enjoyed by party members across the country. Sadly, of course, we are meeting online again. Now, given current circumstances, this is sensible, but I really hope in spring we'll be together in person. Our debates and discussions, if not always the conference karaoke, are much better when we meet up, and I can't wait to see all of you again. Of course, being forced to take a political conference online is a mere inconvenience compared to the sacrifices made by so many over these past 2 years. Life today is much more normal than it was when I spoke to you a year ago. We have come so far, and while it has not been easy, a spirit of solidarity with and compassion for each other has helped us through. Now, as the emergence of the new Omicron variant has reminded us, we must harness that spirit again as we prepare for a winter that might be tougher than most of us have ever experienced. In recent weeks, we have had much in Scotland to feel thankful for. Compared to many countries across Europe, COVID cases here have been stable. Indeed, they have been declining slightly. To be frank, that is a much better position than I had dared hope for a couple of months ago. But there are big and very real challenges ahead over the winter months. Cases are rising in countries all around us. We know that colder weather, forcing us indoors, coupled with festive socialising, will create increased opportunities for the virus to spread. And most seriously of all, the Omicron variant is causing profound concern here and across the world. So we must not drop our guard. This is a time to be more vigilant, not less. In the past few days, the new variant has led the Scottish Government to impose tighter restrictions again at our borders. A number of countries have been added to the travel red list. Travellers from these countries must go into managed quarantine. And we are asking all travellers, no matter where they are travelling from, to isolate until they get a negative result from a PCR test that they must do on day 2 after their arrival. We are also asking close contacts of any confirmed cases of Omicron to isolate. That none of this was even contemplated just a few days ago is a reminder again of how fast this virus can move and change. We must, all of us therefore, redouble our efforts to stop it in its tracks. The good news is that we know how to do that. We have done it before. So today, before I talk to you about politics, I want to ask again for your help. Over these next weeks of winter, we need to pull together and look after each other. I promise that the government will do our job. That means getting all of you who are eligible vaccinated with boosters as fast as possible. Thanks to teams across the country, Scotland is already the most vaccinated part of the UK, but we will not let up. Instead, we are working to speed up. And while I still hope this will not be necessary, if difficult decisions do need to be made to keep us safe, we will not shy away from taking them. Steering the country through this winter is my priority. It is my duty.
But no government can fight a virus alone. We all need to play our part. That was true before the detection of Omicron, and it is even more so now. If all of us increase our compliance with the protections already in place, we will help slow transmission. So I'm asking everyone to please take the time now to think afresh about the basic steps you can take to keep yourself, your loved ones, and the country safe. Wear a face covering in indoor public places. Keep following hygiene advice. Wash your hands and surfaces. Open windows if you have people round. Ventilation really helps. Work from home if possible. And please, please, if you haven't done so already, get every dose of vaccine you are eligible for, including flu. I know there is a concern that the vaccines might be less effective against Omicron than against other variants. We don't know yet if that's the case. But even if it is, getting vaccinated will still matter. Less effective does not mean ineffective. You will still be much more protected with vaccines than you will be without. So if you could be fully vaccinated right now and you have chosen not to be, you are putting your own life at risk. Now you may say that's your choice, though it is one I really struggle to understand. But it's not just your own life you are risking. You could be risking the life of everyone you come into contact with. Vaccines save lives. And don't just take my word for that. A World Health Organization study published last week demonstrates that life-saving power. Hundreds of thousands of people across the world who would otherwise be dead from COVID are alive today only because of vaccines. Here's what the WHO said about us. In countries like Scotland, where vaccination rollout was early and uptake was high, a larger share of lives were saved. It found that in Scotland, without vaccines, around 32,000 people over the age of 60 would have died from COVID this year. 86% of these deaths were prevented by vaccines. That's 27,000 people alive today who would not be if we had no vaccines. Now, for all I know, that might include my mum and dad, or yours, or indeed many of you. So for goodness sake, get vaccinated with your first, second, and if eligible, your third and booster doses as soon as you can. If you don't do it for your own sake, though you really should, do it for those you love. Being vaccinated is the most precious gift we can give this Christmas. But there is one more really important festive effort I am asking everyone to make. And once again, the emergence of Omicron makes this even more vital. Lots of people with COVID don't have symptoms. They might never know they have the virus, and so they spread it inadvertently. That's why we've been asking everyone to test with lateral flow devices twice a week. But from now, through the festive period, we are asking you to test much more. Please, even if you are feeling fine, test yourself on each and every occasion you intend to mix with people from outside your own household. That means before you go to the pub, or to a restaurant, or to someone's house, or even to a shopping centre. And if the test shows up positive, do not go. Instead, get a confirmatory PCR test and self-isolate until you get the result of that. If you don't have a supply of tests, order them now through NHS Inform or pick them up from a local pharmacy or test centre. They are free, so get as many as you need and keep your supply topped up. If we all do this, we will slow down the spread. And we will maximise our chances, not just of a more normal Christmas, but of a safer Christmas too. And let's all hope, a much brighter New Year. I talked earlier about the government's responsibility in leading the fight against this virus. It is a solemn duty. But I am all too aware that the heaviest burden in tackling the virus has been carried by those working in our NHS and in social care. If we all follow the advice on fighting COVID, we will be helping them as well as ourselves. That really matters. Health and care services are under more pressure now than ever before. The staff who care for us in our times of need are exhausted, physically and in many cases emotionally. Words will never ever adequately express my gratitude to them. But in any event, words are not enough. I'm proud that NHS staff in Scotland have been awarded the highest pay rise in the UK, and that we have promised to increase investment in the NHS, already at record levels, by a further 20% over this term of Parliament. I can confirm today that our budget on the 9th of December will deliver a significant down payment on that commitment. In the years ahead, this extra funding will help build new capacity in the NHS and improve the way care is delivered through, for example, a network of elective treatment centres. And at the heart of our plans for reform is the establishment of a national care service. Just as the National Health Service became in the aftermath of the Second World War, this new National Care Service, if we get it right, as we must, will be a fitting legacy from the trauma of COVID. So our plans to build and secure a sustainable future for our health and care services are bold and rightly so. And to help right now, we have committed an additional £300 million for winter support. This money is supporting the immediate recruitment of 1,000 extra NHS workers. It is helping increase the pay of social care staff, giving those earning the living wage a rise of over 5%. And it is funding more care home places and care at home packages to ensure that older people don't languish in hospital when they would be better cared for elsewhere, and in the process free up hospital beds for those who do need them. The front line of the NHS is, of course, so often primary care and general practice. Good access to GPs and other primary care services is essential for patients, but it also helps reduce unnecessary pressure on hospitals. I know how hard GPs and practice staff are working right now. Face-to-face appointments are resuming, although phone and video consultations will continue to play an important part in any modern healthcare system. And we know demand is increasing due to the direct impact of the pandemic and the backlogs caused by lockdown. So GPs and those who support them are working overtime to meet patient needs. I want to thank them for all they do. Of course, we must do more than say thank you, and we will. That's why I can announce today funding of £30 million to help GPs further increase primary care services in their communities. GPs will be able to use this funding, which will be delivered in December and April in 2 equal instalments, in ways that they judge will deliver the greatest impact for patients. That might be through extra GP sessions or additional practice nurse time. In short, it will allow practices to target investment where it is most needed to improve access to primary care and help ensure patients get the care they need as close to home as possible. Tackling the pandemic, supporting and protecting the NHS and social care. These duties will be the focus of the Scottish Government each and every single day as we navigate this winter and beyond. That is what people across Scotland expect, having placed their trust in us once again to govern and lead our country. However, as we emerge from the darkness of winter into what we all hope will be a brighter spring, with COVID more firmly in the rearview mirror, it will be time then to look ahead with optimism and consider the kind of country we want to rebuild. We should embrace that opportunity with relish. I certainly do. Now, as you know, I've just marked 7 years as First Minister. In some ways, I find it impossible to believe that so much time has passed. But then, of course, I look in the mirror and see the evidence of what I'm sorry to say seems much more than 7 years. Being elected to lead this country is a privilege, and it is a serious responsibility. 7 months ago, the people of Scotland gave me and all of us in the SNP a job to do when they re-elected us so emphatically. They voted for us in historically high numbers and they told us to get on with the job. I intend to repay that trust, to lead Scotland not just through COVID, but into and through the process of recovery and renewal. The duty and responsibility of being First Minister weighs heavily on me every single day, as it should. But it is not a job I do out of duty alone. I do it because I relish the opportunities that lie ahead for Scotland. And I know that to harness these opportunities, Scotland needs a government like ours with ambition, aspiration, and real confidence in this country. We already have a track record of delivery. We are laying the foundations for a stronger future. When people ask me what I'm proudest of so far in my time as First Minister, I always point to our transformational, and I use that word deliberately, our transformational support for children. Today, for example, we've announced that the 200,000th baby box has been delivered in Scotland. A practical, tangible and powerful manifestation of our commitment to give every child, no matter their family circumstances, an equal start in life. And then there's the doubling, yes, the doubling of state-funded early years education and childcare. Every 3 and 4-year-old and 2-year-olds from the most vulnerable backgrounds are now entitled to the same number of hours in early year settings as older children get in school. This policy saves parents thousands of pounds a year, but much, much more importantly, it gives children the best start in education. In my very first conference speech as SNP leader, I said that this would be the most important infrastructure investment of my first full term as First Minister. And in August this year, we marked its delivery. We have also created from scratch a new social security system. It has measures to tackle child poverty, the root cause of the poverty-related attainment gap in education, at its very heart. All of this is underpinned by a new income tax system, just like Social Security Scotland, built entirely from scratch and with the progressive principle embedded from the outset. And also, with an eye to the future, we have set up the new Scottish National Investment Bank. This is the first development bank of its kind anywhere in the UK, and it is already making investments to drive our journey to net zero and build a more sustainable future for this and future generations. Now, we don't see the full benefits of transformational policies like this overnight, but they and many like them are already changing the future of tens of thousands of children and of this country as a whole. So we have much to be proud of, but we have so much more still to do. It is that combination of delivery and ambition that drives the SNP's success. The fact is, governments don't get re-elected, and certainly not with the level of support we won in May, unless we have improved people's lives and offer a clear and credible vision of what is possible for the future. Most of our opponents seem utterly incapable of accepting the basic point that our success is hard-earned. It is not an accident or a fluke. So they end up dismissing as irrelevant the choices voters have made. Or even worse, as with the current assault on devolution, they seek to overturn those choices. They act like they think the ambitions of people across Scotland have got out of hand and need to be reined in by those who know better. The SNP will not let that happen. We're not here to see the aspirations of people in Scotland reined in or diminished. We want to raise those ambitions ever higher. We dedicate ourselves to that every day. And we recognise that working with others who also want to move Scotland forward will help us all achieve more. That's why we struck a cooperation agreement with the Scottish Green Party. Putting our differences aside to cooperate where we agree won't always be comfortable, either for us or the Greens, but it is not meant to be. Forcing each other out of our comfort zones so we can raise the bar of achievement higher is the whole point. In my view, this kind of collaborative working is exactly what most people want. But given the challenges all countries face, it is also what we need. Scotland is about to enter a new world, a world of possibility, but also of urgency. I hope soon a post-pandemic world, and certainly a world we must adapt to ensure that our planet remains habitable in the years, decades and centuries to come. We can't escape these challenges, and nor should we want to. Inherent in them are massive opportunities just waiting to be grasped. The big question for Scotland is how we best equip ourselves to do this and ensure that the ambitions of all those who live here can be realised in this new world. These ambitions are not unreasonable, nor are they out of reach. A higher standard of living, good jobs for the future, a clean environment, better health, sustainable public services, and for Scotland as a whole, the ability to harness our vast resources in line with our own priorities and values and contribute as an equal partner to building a better world. To meet those ambitions in this new world, we must lay secure foundations on which a better country can be built. That is what the SNP is endeavouring to do. In this task, we are working in partnership as far as we can. But this current Westminster government is not a willing partner. Instead of helping to lay those foundations, it is undermining them. And let us be clear about this. This UK government is not just seeking to block Scottish democracy and deny Scotland the choice of moving forward to independence. That would be bad enough. But worse than just standing in the way of progress, it is trying to force Scottish democracy into reverse. Make no mistake about this. Boris Johnson's government is actively eroding the power of our democratically elected Scottish Parliament. It has already transferred funding from the Scottish Parliament to Westminster. It has torn up the convention that the UK Parliament should not pass laws in devolved policy areas without Holyrood consent. And it has passed a new law, the Internal Market Act, that the Labour First Minister of Wales has called, and I quote, a smash and grab on the devolution settlement. Now this crystallises the choice Scotland faces. If we don't choose to move our Parliament forward and make it stronger with independence, the Tories will drag it backwards and make it weaker. This assault on the Scottish Parliament is of course reflected in the Tories' wider disdain for democracy. Whether it is threatening to rip up anti-lobbying rules when one of its own was found guilty, or restricting the right to judicial review, or undermining the independence of the Electoral Commission, the message is clear. Whenever the checks and balances of democracy get in its way, this UK government will try to overturn them. That is dangerous. And don't just take my word for that. Ken Clarke, a former very senior Tory cabinet minister, has warned quite extraordinarily that the UK is dangerously close to becoming an elected dictatorship. Now, during the run-up to the independence referendum in 2014, the head of the No campaign then dismissed the idea of Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister as a scare story. We've been reminded over these past few weeks, and in so many different ways, just why anti-independence leaders were so keen to rubbish the prospect of Boris Johnson ever entering Downing Street. The reality of it has been everything many people back then feared. But it's not just about him as an individual. The much bigger problem is a Westminster system that enables someone like him to become Prime Minister in the first place. That is not a secure foundation on which Scotland can build a better future. Our future must be built on a platform of democracy, fairness and economic prosperity. That's what we are seeking to build now, and it is why we want Scotland to become independent. In the here and now, as well as working in partnership with the Greens inside the Holyrood Chamber, we're seeking to extend participation in democratic decision making outside it too. We are pioneering citizens' assemblies and will soon establish one for under 16s, so that the generation who will live with the impact of decisions we take now are more involved in making them. This cooperative, inclusive approach to politics offers a more secure basis from which to move a country forward. Just as our foundation must be democratic, so too must fairness permeate every stone. A fairer, more equal society isn't just morally right, although it is. Evidence shows that the most successful independent countries of Scotland's size are also more equal. A sense of social cohesion and solidarity provides the basis for long-term prosperity. The Tory government's decision last month to cut universal credit by £20 a week could not be further removed from that ideal. That decision, especially at a time of price inflation and tax rises, was cruel and shocking. It was condemned by each of the UK Children's Commissioners, by the Social Security Committees of all 4 UK parliaments, by all 3 devolved governments, by countless campaigners, and even by former Conservative cabinet ministers. But the cut went ahead regardless, and in Scotland it will push 60,000 families and 20,000 children into poverty. The Scottish Government is trying to take a very different approach. We are determined to lift children out of poverty. Of the £2 billion a year that the Scottish Government invests to support people on low incomes, over 670 million is already targeted at children. Through the range of new payments delivered by Social Security Scotland, low-income families receive in the early years of each child's life £5,000 of additional financial support. At the heart of this is the Scottish Child Payment, the only payment of its kind anywhere in the UK, designed solely to lift children out of poverty and give them better lives. The Scottish Child Payment currently provides low-income families with £10 per week for every child under age 6. Over 105,000 children are already benefiting. Next year it will be extended to all children in low-income families under the age of 16. Now, at the election, we committed to doubling the payment to £20 per child per week within this term of Parliament. Our cooperation agreement with the Greens committed us to achieving this as quickly as possible. I am very pleased, indeed proud, to announce today that our budget on the 9th of December will fund the doubling of the Scottish Child Payment immediately from the start of the new financial year. The Scottish Child Payment will increase to £20 per child per week, 4 times the amount originally demanded by campaigners from April. That means the double payments will reach over 100,000 children under age 6 in just 4 months' time. And when we extend the Scottish Child Payment to all under 16s at the end of next year, over 400,000 children and their families will be eligible. This is, without doubt, the boldest and most ambitious anti-poverty measure anywhere in the UK. Now, delivering it isn't easy. It will involve hard choices elsewhere in our budget. But it is a choice that we in the SNP, in partnership with the Greens, are opting to make. Poverty scars too many childhoods. It deprives too many children of the chance to make the most of their education and enjoy life to the full. And it robs our country of far too much potential. Eradicating child poverty is essential if we are to build the strongest foundation for Scotland's future, and that is what we are determined to do. Democracy and fairness are key to building a better, stronger Scotland. So too is a strong, sustainable economy. Scotland is so blessed with natural economic advantages. We have unrivaled energy resources. We are at the cutting edge of the industries of the future and home to some of the world's best universities. Our food and drink industry is an extraordinary international success story. We are a highly skilled and educated people with a rich history of enterprise and innovation. Through the Scottish National Investment Bank, the National Manufacturing Institute and the Young Persons Guarantee, We are building for the future. But just as on child poverty, a UK government that Scotland did not vote for is undermining the strong foundations we are seeking to build. This UK government has taken Scotland out of the EU, out of the European single market and out of the customs union, all against the wishes of the majority who live here. The Brexit it has imposed upon us is already damaging our economy and restricting opportunities for our young people. All of that is bad enough, but there may well be much worse to come. The Tories appear to have embarked on permanent conflict with the European Union. Instead of building bridges, they are burning them. They are threatening to rip up the withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson himself hailed as fantastic and oven ready. And in so doing, they risk a trade dispute with the EU that will set back our recovery from the pandemic and do untold damage to our economy. Now, this might suit a Tory party that sees EU bashing as a vote winner, but it would be a disaster for Scotland. Years or even decades of arguments with the EU is a recipe for instability and economic weakness. In the post-pandemic world, we will need more cooperation between independent countries, not less. And the only way for Scotland to build those relationships on a secure basis is through independence. Now, nowhere is cooperation more essential than in tackling the climate emergency. As a rich, developed nation, Scotland shares a responsibility for a climate crisis which is already wreaking havoc in some parts of the world. Just as we have helped cause the problem, Scotland has a moral duty to be part of the solution. And whether independent or not, Scotland with an SNP government will always show leadership on this most pressing of issues. That means leading by example, which we did and were recognised as doing throughout COP26. It means making the investments needed for our transition to net zero. Our forthcoming budget will set out the next steps we intend to take. It demands accelerating our move away from fossil fuels, but doing so in a fair way which protects the livelihoods of those working in oil and gas and secures a low-carbon energy supply. That's why we are establishing the North East Just Transition Fund. These transitions are not easy, but they demand leadership, urgency and rational decision making. And here again, we have a UK government that too often hinders rather than helps our progress. In the run-up to COP, the Tory government made two inexplicable decisions which passed none of these tests of leadership, urgency and reason, decisions which will undermine efforts to tackle the climate emergency. Firstly, it cut air passenger duty for short-haul flights within the UK. And second, it refused to give priority backing to the obvious site in the northeast of Scotland for carbon capture and storage. This is a decision that will cost Scotland jobs and make our journey to net zero even more difficult. It should be reversed. But we should not be reduced to pleading with a UK government to do the right thing. With independence, we won't have to. Friends, my task as First Minister, above all, is to do whatever I can to keep Scotland safe. That is my first duty, and during this pandemic, it is the heaviest duty imaginable. I will always seek to discharge my responsibilities as First Minister with energy and commitment and to the very best of my ability. But keeping a country safe is not just about the short term. It is also about building the strongest possible foundation on which to build our future. I defy anyone to look at the broken, corrupt, self-serving Westminster system that we are currently part of and conclude that it provides a secure basis for the future of Scotland. So I would not be discharging my duty to the people of Scotland if I did not seek to keep the promise on which we were elected, to offer the people of Scotland the choice of a better future through independence. Next year, COVID permitting, as we emerge from winter into spring, the campaign to persuade a majority of people in Scotland that our future will be more secure as an independent nation will resume in earnest. In the course of next year, I will initiate the process necessary to enable a referendum before the end of 2023. And just as importantly, our party will set out afresh the positive case for independence. We will outline the opportunities and advantages that independence will open up. The opportunity to repair the damage of COVID, including the fiscal challenges it has created for all countries, in a way that aligns with our values and priorities as a nation. To use our financial and human resources to tackle poverty and give young people a better life. To use our vast natural resources to help safeguard our planet and secure green jobs for the future. And to rejoin the European family of nations so that we can expand, not narrow, our horizons and grow our trade across the whole of the continent. We will also be candid about the challenges the transition to independence will present and set out clearly how we can and will overcome these. And then, friends, we will ask the people to decide. Now, what the UK government's response to this will be is not up to me, but my message to the Prime Minister is this. If you have any respect at all for democracy, and if you have any confidence whatsoever in your argument against independence, you too will let the people decide. Friends, let us make our case with confidence and with optimism. Often in Scotland, we talk about becoming independent as if it's something unusual, something that no country has ever done. The reality, of course, is very different. In the last 60 years or so, more than 100 countries have become independent. Very few, if any, of them have the resources and the advantages of Scotland. The fact is, independence is the normal state of affairs for countries the world over. The self-government it encapsulates is the building block for the progressive internationalism that we stand for. And for countries of Scotland's size, the simple truth is this: independence works. Our neighbours across northwest Europe are all wealthier than the UK, more equal than the UK, and have lower levels of poverty than the UK. With all the resources and talents we have available to us, I simply do not believe that Scotland can't match, perhaps even surpass, the success of Denmark, Norway, Ireland, Austria, and the many other prosperous independent countries that are all around us. I do believe, more than ever in this new world we are facing, that the best way to secure a better Scotland is to take our future into our own hands. An independent Scotland will be an outward-looking, welcoming nation, a country that celebrates diversity and works with others to shape a better world. We'll be a partner with our closest friends in the rest of the UK and an EU member committed to the values of equality, democracy and human dignity. For people today and for generations to come, that is a future worth standing up for. It is a future worth campaigning for, and it is a future worth winning. So let us put our shoulders to the wheel of winning and building that better, independent Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. And I know I speak for all of us when I say thank you for your leadership. And with that conference, the 87th Annual National SNP Conference draws to a close. Thank you so much to our sign language interpreters and subtitlers, and thank you so much to our technical team for keeping everything going behind the scenes. I hope that you have all enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you all, hopefully in person, very soon.